morning, all. Please introduce yourselves, tell us where you're speaking from, and give us about 1 minute of what your company does. Also, let us know what is a good lead for you. I'll call you the way I see you on my screen. Our speaker will be last. Rhoda Israelov, please.
Morning, all. After a no sleep night, I'm here in Indianapolis, ready to say it for my clients. And we write what you read when you go on our clients' websites. So we are looking for retirement community, trucking firm, and a business law firm that devotes itself entirely to business and to could be franchising, could be patent law, so something within the business world, so we can say it for them.
Not a problem. David Garrison, please.
Good morning. I'm Dave Garrison. I'm from Martinsville, near Indianapolis, Indiana. I work for Mutual Omaha Mortgage, and I'm a loan originator, a reverse mortgage loan originator, I guess, / educator. I spend most of my time unpacking why housing wealth should be treated the same way anybody else's wealth is, and the idea of utilizing it in a meaningful manner while it's still available to you during your lifetime. Good lead for me is really a wealth advisor, real estate agent, a financial advisor, maybe an elder care attorney who has a client who wishes to do just that, utilize their housing wealth to serve some purpose. Might be provide long-term care funds, might be to purchase a second home, might be to educate grandkids. So it's that's me.
Thank you, David. Nick Sullivan, please.
Hey everyone, Nick Sullivan, Sullivan Business Solutions here in Raleigh. Work across the nation, help capture specialized federal programs and expense reduction opportunities if they own buildings or hire or retain employees or do some research and development, developing products and services. I could help any Main Street business. In fact, I was with my dentist yesterday having a cleaning, and I mentioned employee retention credits. He never heard of it. And he was shut down for 2 months, so he's eligible. So hopefully we'll get together. He's interested. Also talked to a small manufacturer with only 8 employees, and he never heard of it. So these are incentives that people have never heard of that could put thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars back in the business. So Main Street businesses, it can be any kind of business with employees or buildings. Keep that in mind. Nick Sullivan, Sullivan Business Solutions.
Thank you, Nick. Adele Bush, please.
Well, good morning, everyone. Adele Bush is here live after a good night's sleep, Columbus, Ohio. My business is Sba Business Services, LLC. We do personalized, customized, and exclusive executive telephone outreach. We also do business research, prospect development, and we are a champion appointment maker for our clients. A good referral for me would be a business that has accounts receivable that they'd like to collect between now and the end of the year. We have been very successful doing accounts receivable calls for a client, and I love what it does for them. They're all very happy. It helps them out, and I'd love to be able to transfer those skills for another client and help them collect some long overdue money by way of the telephone. Adele Bush with Sba Business Services, LLC.
Thank you, Adele.
Thank you.
Now everyone is concerned about my sleeping habits. Thank you, Rhoda. Zach Fox, please.
Good morning, everyone. Zach Fox, Edward Jones Investments. I won't comment on any sleeping habits at this point, so I'll leave that to the side. But I'm coming to you live from the southeast suburbs of Indianapolis, and I'm here to help with any personal investing or business investing needs. We're finding ourselves more and more becoming more of a bank service as well as investing. We offer debit cards, check writing for personal and business uses, And I apologize ahead of time. I may be in and out of this Zoom call because it's happened second year in a row. A lot of people just wait until the end of the year for these various end of year stuff. And I don't get it, but 529 contributions, tax loss harvesting. So let's try not to wait to the last minute. And if you've done it so far, just don't do that to your advisor, please. Anyway, Zach Fox, Edward Jones Investments, happy to help you.
I'm sorry, Zach, but we're all going to stiff you again next year, buddy. It's just part of the deal. I would apologize, but it's like running any project. Clients wait till the last minute to bring it to you. So it's just tough, buddy. Tony Havix, please.
Yeah, I'm Tony Havix with PH2. We do environmental health and safety consulting and forensic engineering. Really, everything that we do revolves around risk management, and it's trying to reduce your risk so that you can go to sleep at night. Got to get that in there somewhere. Love you too, Keith.
All right, man.
Within that concept of managing risk, we do a lot of counseling, we do a lot of education, and then we build a rapport, and then we work on both the litigation avoidance side as well as working clients through various things. And from a standpoint of what's a good client, it could be an attorney, it could be an insurance adjuster, it could be somebody along those lines who needs their they need their hand held, or it could be they just need to be advised of what are their options and what's available. And so those are probably two good leads for me. I'm in Indianapolis, but I do work pretty much anywhere, including outside the U.S. And I don't know about Zach, but we've only written 2 checks physical checks in the last year, so it is kind of funny for him to mention checks. I mean, I still like the old-fashioned handwritten checks and printed checks, but that is kind of funny.
Not a problem. And Tony, keep us in the loop about how your business is going. I know you mentioned a couple of weeks or a week or so ago that you might look at some sort of change in 2022. Keep us in the loop on that, because that is very interesting to watch firms change and evolve, which gets us to our speaker today. Our speaker today is Jeri Lucco. Jeri, you have the floor, and you are the co-host and have control of any screen if you had to do it. With that, go ahead, Jeri.
Okay, thank you, Keith. So I'm going to start by saying Jeri Lucco. My company name is, I have 2 company names. It's ATD Business Consulting, and IDBA is Franchise Business Source. So when I'm talking to franchisors or business partners, I tend to use my ATD Business Consulting ID. But when I'm talking to franchisees, I use Franchise Business Source. It just does a better job of saying what I do, I guess. And I help both aspiring and serial entrepreneurs find perfect fit franchise businesses to either get that lifestyle and money and freedom that they're looking for, or frankly, to expand their portfolio so that they can, have, kind of spread the risk, so to speak, right? So I'm not doing a slide presentation today. I just have a couple of areas that I'm going to talk about, and I do want to start by thanking Rhoda. Rhoda was like private chatting me a couple of different times saying, I really think you need to, take a session at one of the meetings, and she had some areas that she had some questions about. So I've kind of tailored what I'm going to talk about around some of the areas that Rhoda said she was most interested in. If you have questions, please ask them along the way. And my hope is that you leave today with maybe just a little bit more insight into what I do and the franchising space, which is full of myths, than when you came into the meeting. So I titled this Bringing Franchise Life to Life. And really, I want to walk through kind of the process for what it is to become a franchise owner. and starting with the evaluation process. A lot of people think that if you can slap down, $50,000 to $100,000, that you can be a franchisee. And that really is not true anymore. Honestly, maybe in the olden days, and frankly, there probably are still some brands out there that are like this, but most of the brands that I work with go through a qualification process that not only includes the financial qualification, but are really intent on looking for people that have a culture fit and a personality fit for that business, that they feel, that they're going to be able to work within that franchise system. And that qualification process, depending on how the franchise sells their franchises, or I should say awards their franchises, has a couple of tiers to it. If they work with a broker network, one or more broker networks, which such as like a me, then I am that first tier of qualification. I cover a few things. I cover financial, and there's like 4 key pieces of information that I'm looking for from a financial qualification perspective. I look for the amount of liquid capital they have, so cash or stocks, things that could easily be converted into cash within, say, a 2 to 3 week time span. I look for and ask about their net worth. Most franchises actually have a criteria for what they want someone to have in terms of a net worth. And you also actually wouldn't believe how many people I have to explain what net worth means. And, like that whole assets minus liabilities thing, and makes it fun. It's like, okay, you didn't go to business school. And then depending on the answers that I get from those first 2 questions, sometimes I'll ask them about what they have in terms of retirement funds. Because there are ways to use retirement funds in a tax-free way to get a business started. It's not my preferred way, but I always want to know that just in case. And then the last piece of information I ask for from a financial perspective is an over-under on credit score. I ask if they're over under 700. If they're under 700, then I usually do a follow-up about like, well, how much under? Are we looking at 625 or are we looking at 685? So, but I use 700 as my base. But then I'm actually also looking for, I'll call them softer skills. I'm gauging someone's level of engagement in their conversations with me. Do I feel like they're open to learning about different businesses? Do they make meetings? I get ghosted so much on like the second or third call. And frankly, I get ghosted a lot on the first call too. So are they making meetings with me? If they don't make a meeting, do they let me know? I will keep working with someone if they're a little bit skitsy with me, but frankly, eventually I'll just kind of drop them, right? I'm okay with someone saying, I'm not ready, or I'm just exploring right now, but I'm probably not going to be ready for a couple of years because I know I don't necessarily have the money right now. I'm cool with all of that kind of information. But just, be transparent with me, be transparent with any franchise that I introduce you to about what your timing is and kind of where your head's at, right? That's my biggest ask when I'm working with a candidate. When I introduce them to a franchise, the franchise itself is usually going to have say a 3 to 7 step process before they will get to the point of awarding a franchise. It starts with an introductory call, 30 to 45 minutes to talk about the brand, get a, kick the tires sense of the person they're talking to. They usually want them to fill out a more detailed application so that they can send out the franchise disclosure document. There are strict rules put out by the FTC around the FDD. A person cannot be asked if they are ready to commit to a franchise within 14 days of acknowledging receipt of that FDD. You could get a franchise disclosure document today. You could have it in your inbox and be reading it for 3 months, but until you actually sign the acknowledgement form, that time clock does not start ticking. And I've done that. I was talking to a franchise. I had it in my inbox for about a month before I decided to acknowledge it, because I didn't want that clock to start going down. So they'll have you fill out the application so that you can get the FDD. Then, depending on the franchise, they're going to have several meetings. They're going to have a meeting about real estate selection, if applicable. They're going to talk to you about operations. They're going to talk to you about how they support you in their marketing. If there's a big sales aspect to it, then they may have a separate meeting specifically about the sales. Most of the time it gets combined into the marketing conversation. There'll be a specific meeting to answer your questions about the FDD. Many times they'll have a specific meeting where you meet the executives. In the past, before COVID, it would be done during a discovery day. They'd have you come into their headquarters and have you meet the team that's going to be supporting you as a franchisee. Nowadays, they do it different ways. They might do a virtual discovery day. They might do, I want you to talk to our COO. They have become a little bit more flexible about it. And then there's a very important phase, which we call validations, which is where you're going to be talking to current franchisees. The counsel that I give my clients, my potential franchisees, is you need to be thinking of the questions that you have to develop a pro forma for the business, a business plan for the business. You need to be asking questions, and franchises will help with this. They'll have you usually talk to someone who's very successful, maybe not the most successful, but on the successful end, and maybe someone who's at the lower end, maybe someone who's newer, maybe someone who's been doing it for a long time. They'll give you a range of people to talk to. And I'm always like, the job of the discovery process is to get your questions answered. So think about the questions that you're talking to the successful franchisee, and listen to what it took for him to get to success and how long it took for him to get to success. And think about, can you do that? Can you do the things that he did to become successful? Listen to the answers from the guy who's maybe at the bottom of the pile, right? What is he not doing that the successful guy is doing, right? What's the difference between them? What makes one sell like nobody's business and what makes one just kind of tick along? So it's a very thoughtful process. I have some franchises that, frankly, at the end of that validation stage, if they do have discovery days or whatever, they may reject 80% of the people that come through their doors. And that's even after I've done the qualification. So you can imagine what that looks like in terms of percentage of people that get a franchise that come into the system in the beginning. But you know, if everyone does their job well, it doesn't wait until the end. They either self-select themselves out, or you basically say, I don't think this is going to be a fit. It's not just one size fits all. You know, it is a process to figure out if there's a good fit there and the potential to be successful. One of the questions that Rhoda was super curious about is how to afford a franchise. So I mentioned that you've got, you know, if you go out onto a franchise portal, it says 50K min required. That 50K min is the liquid capital requirement. Unfortunately, people come into the system and think, oh, I've got, you know, yeah, I could afford a 50K business. Well, you know, it's 50K plus, right? And they should have that little plus there. In discussions with potential franchisees, I don't actually usually talk too much about the franchise fee, because that franchise fee is embedded in that investment range that they're going to tell you about. But I do talk about that investment range, and the investment range includes some very specific things. It does include the franchise fee. It might include a real estate selection fee. It always includes an expected working capital number. Franchises are very conscious that you come into the business with the appropriate capitalization to be able to keep the business running until you are running, you know, financially, operationally break even or cash flow positive, right? Their success depends on your success. They don't want you coming in bootstrapped, right? But there's a very specific section of the franchise disclosure document that talks about the low end investment and the high end investment. Then they have copious notes about what basically what creates that range of low to high, right? And they'll have it line itemed out, the big things like licensing, insurance, leasehold improvements if applicable, equipment leasing, all the big ticket items, you know, training, sometimes labor, but labor tends to be part of that working capital number, grand opening marketing that's expected and things like that. So if someone comes in, if they have $50,000 cash, then I'm honestly really going to be steering them towards a franchise that maybe can get up and running for the 150, no more than about $200,000. SBA loans are the most common way to do it. There's lots of places out there that you can use other kinds of funding to get a business up and running. But the SBA is going to be looking for you to contribute between 10 and 30% of the overall startup investment. So if you have 50,000 in cash, then think about it as the, you know, if it's 10%, okay, yeah, good. You can get into like 400, 450, something like that. Honestly, the norm is more like 30%. There's some businesses where the risk is so low that they'll go for 10. Or if you have if it's like a real property thing, then it tends to be more than 10. But generally, you know, I'm going to be erring on the side of caution for, because I don't want them to overextend themselves. The franchise doesn't want them to overextend themselves. So a lot of the work that I'm doing is helping guide them to what they can afford. And I usually try to introduce them to a few funding partners almost as soon as they're talking to a franchise. Most of my funding partners will do pre-qualification. They'll ask for a ton of paperwork. They'll ask you to pull your credit reports so it's not hitting your credit. And then they'll come back and say, if you have 50,000 cash, here's how much you're going to be able to borrow. And most of them, two of the ones that I work with, they kind of guarantee that, like 95, 98% guarantee that you're going to end up being able to get that kind of funding. Any questions so far? Anybody have any questions?
I got a question here.
Sure.
Because, I see this from time to time. I want to be in business. I'm tired of working for somebody else. What can you do for me? Do you ever get that kind of a thing? And then how do you handle it? Because people just like, I'm just tired of being it's crazy, but do you ever get that?
I do. I do get it. It is, honestly, it's not the norm of what I get. And I'm cool with those kind of people, because one of the biggest challenges that I have in my qualification process is that the people come in and they haven't necessarily gotten to the point where they believe in themselves enough, right? Someone who comes in and says, I am tired of working for someone else. What can you do for me? They've crossed that hurdle. That's my biggest hurdle. And then it's a case of, let's find what fits, right? But that mindset that they are ready to go is nirvana for me. And they're not so bullshit that they're like, I want to go do it myself, right? They definitely want that framework of, give me a plan. Gosh, I've talked to a couple of people lately that I wish they end up saying these things that I'm like, why in the heck am I not recording this? Because, they're maybe not franchise owners, but they'll talk about like, a franchise gives me, this blueprint, and it gives me this and it gives me that. I would never not do a franchise. And I'm like, wow, where were you when I was trying to, do an ad kind of thing? But yeah, I love those kind of people. They are not my norm.
Okay.
They're not my norm.
And I got a question about this FDD. Yeah. I have been reading these things. These things are thick, ugly, and can lead to a hell of a lot of litigation. Do you emphasize with your team, the people who are bringing on, they need to read that FDD? For those of you who don't know what that is, that's the franchise disclosure document. That thing is a monster. When you're dealing with especially newbies, do you make them understand that FDD is kind of like serious?
Yeah. I don't. A lot of me's will walk them through kind of high level what the FDD is. I don't go section by section. But I'm very upfront saying, look, it's voluminous. It's, the average is about 180 pages, and it includes an exhibit of what the franchise agreement is. But it tells you what you need to know in terms of what the expectations are of you, the franchisee, and of the franchise, right? As well as the background about that franchise. So if they have had litigation, how they're performing, what their costs are going to be, what they're going to do for you for marketing, what you are expected to do. It's a really important document. Take your time and read it. And I always refer them to a franchise lawyer. And it is very important that they talk to a franchise lawyer. I have been down the road where I've had a lawyer look at it, and the lawyer, they don't understand franchise law. And so they come back and they're like, oh my gosh, this thing is awful. It's awful for you. and I'm upfront with my potential franchisees too. I'm like, look, when you sign that agreement, you're on the other side of that agreement. That agreement is there to protect you as much as it is to protect the franchise. Because when you are a franchisee, you want the other franchisees to mind the rules. You don't want a renegade franchisee out there who decides to do things that could seriously damage your brand and damage your own business. So you need to be looking at it in the light of, well, how is this going to protect me once I'm on the other side of that document, right? And a franchise lawyer will do that. They will explain where, the ones I work with will be upfront saying, hey, look, yeah, this is kind of slanted towards them, but, the chances of this happening are, or this is the reason that they've got it like that. They actually, they earn their money in terms of explaining to the potential franchisees, why that wording is in there and how it protects not only the franchisor, but them as a franchisee. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else got any questions?
I got,
Nick?
Nick.
yes. Obviously, we're going through a kind of unique period with COVID, supply chain, inflation. I just saw an owner said that they're working 90 hours a week because this is on Fox or one of those stations, and said because they can't keep employees because there's turnover, so they got to fill in where they didn't have to. How's that impacting franchises? Is it different than it was before COVID? Are you finding, or how? What are some of the ramifications now?
Everyone is having some challenges. I will tell you that the franchising space is busier than ever. My affiliate network is having a record year in terms of closed deal across the broker network. I'm super busy. That the whole Great Resignation is contributing a lot to that. I am getting, I've had several people through that are like, can you find me something that minimizes the number of employees I need? Which bodes well for places like laundromats and dry cleaners, right? Because they don't need a lot of people. So I do try to, it does make me focus on what they're going to need in terms of employees and what they might need to do in terms of bringing on and retaining employees. But I usually, if it's a brand I haven't worked with lately, before I introduce someone in, I usually have a conversation with the brand asking them how they're doing through all of this. And frankly, if they're having challenges, I won't refer in. I won't recommend that brand to a particular candidate. If someone's a little more risk friendly, then maybe I will, right? Because I feel like they'd be able to kind of muscle through it. But if someone's a little bit like, I'm not so sure, then it'll change who I would refer in and who I wouldn't refer in. But I'm usually like, how are you handling the employee thing? How are you doing this? And I usually want to understand, basically how it's operating through all of this and what they're seeing in terms of how it's affecting their staff. But I also then do say to my potential franchisees, like a franchisee who's had their business for a significant period of time is going through the same challenges that you would be as a new franchisee. And they're still able to be successful, right? The brand still is able to average $1 million in sales a year. So there are ways to get through it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to be generating the revenue that they're generating. So those need to be part of the questions that you're asking when you're talking through the validation stage and then when you're talking to the franchisor to learn about it.
Rhoda, please.
I have two questions unrelated to each other. One has to do with Dave and reverse mortgages. is this, David first, is this a legitimate use for reverse mortgage proceeds to buy a franchise? And then on Jerry's end, would that be acceptable as cash net worth? And how could that work?
Well, if you're asking me, Rhoda, I would certainly say that certainly is one of a resource that's often overlooked in terms of starting a new business. Now, whether Jerry can accept it or not is another question, but in my view, it's certainly a liquid resource that could be considered.
Yeah, I have not specifically asked the question, but I don't see why it wouldn't be. It's a good question. You know what? I'll ask a couple of my funding guys, but I would see it being a totally legitimate source of funds.
The thing is, I think in order for it to count, the line of credit would have to be in place.
Right.
So, you're having to think ahead. If you're working with someone, it might be a matter of some low number of months, 2 or 3 months from the time they decided to do it till the money was actually available to them.
Right.
Yeah.
But the other question that I have, it has to do with real life person who told me that their big disappointment in their acquaintance who entered a franchise was that they kept nickel and diming them in terms of decorations and the physical space and the building, and they had to constantly be coming up with money to go to the franchisor for whatever it was. There was always like this giant fee attached to it, according to this person.
Okay. So the question is, does that happen? It can happen. I haven't encountered that with franchisees that I talk to too much. I have had it from a couple of brands, actually brands that I don't represent. I had a guy down in Mississippi who had a couple of like Hardee's restaurants, Carl Jr.'s restaurants, and that was a complaint of his, that they kept doing redesigns and they kept, trying to figure out, honestly, they were trying to figure out how to be relevant and get relevant again. And that was a complaint of his, that they, he was constantly having to do something in terms of redesigns and stuff like that. But I haven't necessarily encountered it with the brands that are in my portfolio.
Yeah, that goes back to that FDD, Rhoda.
Yeah.
Almost all of those kinds of requests were mentioned in that FDD. As a matter of fact, they would be capped in the FDD, to be precise. And that doesn't mean that the franchisor would execute on these changes, but it does give them the opportunity to execute on these changes. And once again, it is the job of the franchisee to read the FDD, all 167 pages of it. And then you don't get these kinds of things like your friend was talking about. You can be pissed off, but you signed up for it, right? It's like being married. Sometimes you just smile and keep it moving, right? So, that's why I really emphasize that FDD as you talk to your friends, et cetera. Man, it's a bear to read, but you got to read them. You got to read them. So
yeah, I usually counsel my clients that pick it up, go through it quickly, just to look for like highlights or any red flags, and to get a sense of what's in there, right? And then go back to the top and read it thoroughly over some time. I mean, you've got time, you honestly, you're kind of in the driver's seat as to when you sign the darn thing, right? So don't feel like you have to be rushed about it or anything like that.
What's a normal start to finish for your people?
Oh gosh,
something that you would think.
Honestly, I would say 3 to 6 months. funny enough, one of my colleagues just had one from the initial introduction to signing the agreement. It took 3 weeks. I have never heard it. None of us have ever heard of it taking. Honestly, 42 days is considered like a short amount of time, right? But this guy, it's a coffee brand that's actually doing very, very well. And I think heading into Indiana, it's out of Colorado, but this guy got introduced to the brand, got the FDD, 3 weeks, he signed that agreement. He must have had the cash in his pocket because it's not a cheap brand. Yeah, I was like, wow, I'm a little jealous, but whatever. But I would say, 3 to 6 months. And I've got some people that I've been working with for months and months and months, and they're probably still 3 or so months away. I wanted to finish up with a couple of success stories, and which honestly is, part of the reason that I do this, right? So I think over the summer and early fall, I was saying to you guys about I had this client in California that was turning my hair gray, right? She had come in looking for a resale. Sal Acosta and he actually introduced me to her. He'd been working with her for months. And it just wasn't, nothing was resonating. And then he said to me, she didn't want a franchise, but I think now she's a little bit desperate and she'll look at a franchise. She lived in Southern California, so I had several brands. I showed her 3, and the second brand that I showed her is the Lash Lounge. It's a beauty brand. And honestly, like she said, I saw the word lash accidentally when you were scrolling, and I've just been waiting for you to, and it was the second brand I showed her, right? But she was like, after I showed her that, there was never any other brand that she was actually ever going to talk about. It took us months to get things closed. There was the complication of it being a resale, and frankly, the guy selling was not disclosing how much in arrears he was on the rent for the 2 locations. There was all sorts of issues back and forth. She did some dumb shit. I could have beaned her a few times, that kind of stuff. But I called her about 3 weeks ago. I said, hey, how's it going? I had told her that I would give her an hour a week for 3 months, just as be a sounding board or a consultative resource for her, because she was a little skittish about it. And she said, going into the shop is my happy place. She kept her day job. She said, going in there is my happy place. I wish I could be there all of the time. I wish I could quit my day job and just run this business. That's what I love to do when I've had a bad day and everything is like chaotic at my day job. When I get into the shop, it's like serenity for me. And it just, I can't tell you how much it touched my heart. It's like, even thinking about it, I'm like, oh, I get all teary-eyed. It was just so wonderful to hear about. And then the other one is a client that has not signed a franchise. And honestly, he's probably about 80-20 as to whether or not he does in the end. But he has been in the service for 35 years. And he came to me in February. He was like, I'm getting out in November and I want to have a business. I want to have it up and running and stuff like that. So we started in absolutely, I love this guy. And we've actually become, I think, good friends. But then nothing was resonating with him. I was really struggling. And then I was like, look, I need you to tell me what you want to do, And Valerie Beal, Keith, I've introduced you to Valerie. Valerie is a leadership executive coach who focuses on MBTI. So I had Keith meet Valerie, and she actually shared with him some insights about himself that it made him kind of rethink. But then I got back on the phone with them. I mean, I don't know. I think I was going to a business coaching class or something. And I got on the phone with them and I was like, look, I don't think you're ready. I think you need to take some time. He was starting to feel like maybe he wasn't going to retire. And he was kind of changing his mind. And he's been there 35 years. And I said, look, I can only tell you that, I was in corporate life forever. And I'm a little older than you. And all I can say now is that I wish I would have done it 10 years sooner. And I don't want you to be, 4 to 5 years down the line and regretting that you didn't make this move, because you will. You absolutely will. And I talked to him this week, and he actually put in his papers to retire. He finishes at the end of the year. And he said, I'm going to take your advice, and I'm taking a couple of months off. I'm going to just do stuff around the house in January. I'm going to probably go on a golfing trip with some service buddies in February. He's like, I need it to clear my head. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you. I'm so excited for you and everything. And he said, I don't think I would have retired. I don't think I would have pulled the trigger if you and I hadn't been talking, and if you hadn't shared some of your life stories. And again, I was like, oh, it's like, oh, it's like, and he hasn't even bought anything, so he may not, but if he does, here's the thing, if he does, I know it'll be through me, because I was just honest with him. And, if I don't think it's right for someone, then I'm not going to try to force them into that square peg. It has to be right.
Well, Jeri, sounds like your next career is psychologist and psychoanalyst. So with that, we're going to close out this week. Very, very interesting, that relationship of getting people to commit. That's a thing in business, boy. I can tell you that for sure. So just so we all know, we'll be back here next week. That will be our last session until January. So did want to make sure everybody knew that. I will be here next week, whether you guys are here or not, and we will have our last session for the year, and we'll get, my alarm is going off. Let me know it's 9:30. So much appreciate it, Jeri. Appreciate all you guys showing up this week. So I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.